I'm having to put it together today to actually solve a problem that I have with my wife's car here. She got rear-ended a few months ago, and after that we noticed there was actually a leak at the rear differential. It looks like it's going to be an issue with the seal where the CV axle joins into the rear differential. And so what we're going to go about today is actually going through and changing the fluid in the rear differential as well as replacing the seal. I found some videos on how to replace an axle but not the seal, different seals that aren't this bar. What this is a 2018 Jeep Grand Cherokee. So with that, we'll get into it. You'll probably see my little helper along the way here. But with that, we'll start with actually removing the rear left tire from the car. Thank you, Bubba. That's not the tool that I need for this. Everything on these Jeeps is metric, it seems. So the lug nuts on this is a 22 millimeter lug nut. And if you haven't gotten one of these and you ever have to do anything that is impact related, the battery powered impacts are amazing. I've used the pneumatic ones for years, and switching over to battery is just awesome. They have so much power. I actually usually start on impact setting 1. I have made the mistake of going too high and it being too powerful and snapping lug nuts, or snapping bolts rather. But so we'll start with removing the tire. Little trick, if you do get a lug nut stuck inside of an impact, if you go the other way and just give it a little tap, it'll usually free it up. Okay, so I've got the tire off. The next thing that I saw in this video is that I need to actually remove and free up the axle itself for this. I probably should be using a metric, but I don't have a metric large enough. I happen to have a standard that's pretty close, so let's hope this doesn't booger it up. Alright, so I went and got some penetrating lubricant. In this case it's a PB Blaster instead of WD-40, but so we'll get started with this. So that can come off of there real nice. And be careful with these bolts as they come off. If they're tight, they'll get really hot. So just be careful in grabbing it. Alright, so what the video said I should do next, see if this works, is we need to actually free this axle from the houser, from the unit here. And to do so, we take a punch and stick it right in the center of the axle here and tap it. So we see we have movement, which we already have movement, so I guess that's good. One thing that I didn't mention is this particular unit does have airbags, so we'll see how that causes some trouble for us. I'm sure it will, but along the way, because that takes up a lot of space. The next thing that the video says I should do is actually take the brake calipers off. So there should be a couple of nuts back here, and they're supposed to be 18 millimeter in size. Gotta figure out how I get in here because it's quite tight. A very tight little space. So alright, so these bolts back here are actually in a really tight spot. Too tight to even get a box end wrench on, so what I'm trying to, and if you want to come over here and kind of show them, what I'm trying to do is figure out exactly how much space I have to get in here to get on this bolt right there, which is holding the brake caliper in place. And so this brake line right here is actually the biggest problem that I have. So I'm thinking I'm going to have to get this on here and then add the ratchet after the fact to be able to come around behind with an extension and hopefully not mess up my airbag. Maybe I can't do an extension. Alright, this brake line is quite problematic. I can't take the brake line off. I need an extension half the length of my current extension. This sucks. Alright. I understand why shops want to charge a fortune for doing this seal. Alright. I was at least able to get it on there. So, for those of you out there, I ended up having to use a 3/8 inch wrench to get in here. The 1/2 inch was way too large. Let's see if we can break this guy free. Yep. Yep, there it goes. Alright. I got the top, or yeah, the top one. That one's free. Let's get down here and get this bottom one, which is right under the bottom of the caliper. And one thing that I don't have that I wish I had is a set of wrenches that had more teeth to them. I just have cheap old Craftsman. Alright. Let's use a little trick. 4-pound hammer and just give it little taps. Then it starts to free it. You do risk breaking your ratchet doing that though, so probably not advisable, but it does work for breaking things free. So then we're gonna just take these bolts all the way out and move our brake caliper out of the way. Bolt number 1. Now for the more difficult one here, to even get your fingers on. It sounds like the children are playing with my tools over there. So when I take this off, the brake line's still going to be attached, and so I don't have the fancy mechanic hook to hang stuff. So I'm going to need to find a way to prop this up and out of the way. And let me actually put a bolt back in here. It looks like it would probably be advisable to, I don't know if you can see, to take this little bracket free so that I get a little bit more motion and can get this caliper out of my way. So I'm gonna put this bolt at the bottom back in just to hold us in place so I can get myself a block and take that little bracket off. Okay, just buy me a little bit of time and take this guy off right here. For future reference for you guys, this is a 10mm that holds this little bracket on here. I was able to just free it with the box-in wrench since I didn't have a ratchet handy, and then just thread it off by hand. And then slide it out, being very careful of that airbag. That would be a very costly mistake to mess up. That's actually looked pretty good for 80,000 miles. Alright, so I had to build a little house for my daughter of scrap lumber from building. Happened to work great as a brake caliper holder. Alright, so the next thing that we need to do is actually free this whole hub assembly from all the hardware that holds it together. And for that, there's a few bolts that we have to take out. The first two, I believe, are these control arms at the top. For those, it is a 18mm wrench that actually has a nut on one side, and then the bolt goes through, and so you gotta get in here behind and hold it, and then you can use the impact from the other side. Seems like everything with this is going to be a tight clearance job, So we're gonna see what I can do with a very small knuckle buster. Hopefully it gets big enough to hold it on the backside. Alright, let's size it on the front. It should be the same back there. And all we gotta do is give it a barely hold it so that the impact can do its work in order to free it. But you've got to get to where it can actually get on the head, which might be the challenge in this spot. Okay, there we go. If I go that way, I can hold it. And come in here. There we go. Now get that one free. And what I'm going to do different than the video did is actually just go ahead and take the nuts off of each of these while they're still in place before I actually go and pull the bolts out, because then everything kind of starts moving on you. So let's get this next one, which is right on the top. Also an 18 millimeter. That one's free. And then the last one I believe I have to take is this, I think it's a sway bar or something over here on the back side of the hub. And that should get it to where I can take this whole thing and pivot it out to free up this axle. This one, however, is a different size, I think. Oh, no, it's actually the same size and same situation. So, on this one, though, the head, instead of the nut, is what I'm actually going to be impacting on. That's free. So the last thing that I have to do before I start pulling bolts and separating the hub assembly from the axle itself is to loosen this control wire cable. So there's these little green tree holders here. Let's see if I can do it by hand. And if not, I gotta go try and find my tool that is somewhere to actually yank these things free. In a little bit. Pull on the wire. There we go. Got one. Popped out easy. This one might be a bit more of a pain. Yep, able to pull it all by hand, so that was good. So then we're going to start taking all these bolts out, and once we take the bolts out, you gotta keep a hold of this because it's going to want to kind of push down, and so at that point we will separate the axle from the hub assembly. So the question is, which one's going to go first? Or am I going to have to tap them free? Okay. first one. Now that's interesting. So on this particular one, there's a washer with a flat spot. Because of the tight clearance, the washer actually has to sit in here a very specific way. So take note of that when we go to put it back together, so that I don't lose my parts as I'm taking it apart, putting nuts back on. And in case, I'll go ahead and throw these back in here just so I know where they go into the brake caliper. Because I am not a mechanic that deals with this stuff every day. Alright, so upper control arm piece is free. Now we gotta get this lower one here, which let's see if I can get it started with some taps. Yep, there we go. This one actually also has a flat washer. A lot of tight space on this guy. And the airbags, in fact, do make this more difficult. Made this tight space even tighter. But we are one bolt away from this hub assembly coming free. So that should be this guy here. I don't know. All these things seem to be under a certain amount of tension. If you didn't notice, when I took these bolts out, they actually shot up. So I guess there's some tensioners built into these things. Even this one has tension to go right there. So now we need to actually be careful about this and try and pull this axle free without letting the threads of the axle hit on the way out, because it would make it difficult to get back in, is my understanding of what I gotta do. Probably should have taken the rotor off, but there we are. Rotor is now off. Axle is now dislodged from there. I don't plan on replacing the axle, so I'm trying to keep it in as good a shape as possible as we work our way through this. So there it is. It's free. It's out of this little assembly here. Tried to make sure that as I pulled it out, that I didn't let this face drag in here and mess up any of these races, because that could cause failure on the hub assembly later. Alright, so the next step is actually freeing the axle from the differential back there. For that, I've got to apparently get in there with the pry bar and pop the locking ring free. And once I've done that, the entire axle should slide out, in theory. Let's see how well theory turns into reality. Or not. As it were. I don't know if you want to show them the issue we're dealing with here. So you can see we have this oily buildup all over the differential. And when I got to looking, it's been like this for a while. It looks like it's just popping, or been leaking around the seal and just splattering around and getting everything nasty and oily and greasy back here. Okay. So, Amber, your exhaust job happens to make this more difficult. So since you decided you needed really nice dual exhaust, it runs right in the way of where I'm supposed to pry. Pop this thing free. Let's try and do this without messing up your exhaust. Alright. Okay, so this is a significant difference that I'm finding between the video I was watching and what I'm working on. So, the video I was watching, they were replacing this side. And on this side, there's actually a big old gap that you can get in with a pry bar and plenty of space to pry on it. On this side, there's nearly no space for a pry bar. And on top of that, there's this little thin piece of metal that I don't know if this was part of the seal that I actually have to replace. I don't know if this turns. Yeah, it looks like it turns with the axle. And so I'm kind of hesitant to pry there. But I think I'm going to have to, because this is not. Oh, never mind. I guess I didn't need to pry at all. And I'm glad I didn't pry, because that looks like that's all part of the axle. So all I did was actually kind of pull the axle and it separated. Interesting. Now what we can see is that I was not smart here and should have gone ahead and drained the differential so that when I pulled that out, oil didn't come pouring down on me. What's concerning is that nothing came out when I did that. I would expect that oil would have come out when I did that, which means we might have been a little bit lower on oil than I thought initially inside of the differential. But before I go ahead and pull this axle out of here, I'm actually going to go through and drain the differential just in case this is holding back oil after all. I need a handy little number 8 Allen. That's what I've been told, at least. And yep, that looks like that's got it. You want to start with opening the actual fill, and just in case you get to the point that you have to put everything back together and you can't get the fill open, you're not completely hosed. The fill is actually up kind of on the front side of the differential towards the top of the differential, and then the drain is down here on the bottom. So I really wish I had an Allen set for my ratchet, but I do not. Okay. With that, I need to grab my handy dandy 4-pound hammer. Yep, there it goes. Freed it up. Much like when you're using an impact, shocking it with a hammer is doing largely the same thing. That shock helps to break up any grime that would be in the threads. So we'll take this guy all the way out. We should get to where it's easily taken out by fingers. And actually, before I do that, sweetheart, will you hand me some paper towels?
Yes.
Get around both your fill and drain. At some point, we probably want to get up in here with some like degreaser, clean this whole assembly, get all this stuck on oil off. Are we recording again?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Alright, so I've got the fill actually loose enough I can take it out by fingers. So let's just get this in a nice safe place. And as we do this, we'll inspect it for anything that's actually laying on here that what I'm hoping not to see is metallic pieces, which would be something that would be indicative of the gears having gotten messed up, or at least wearing. Okay, so a little trick I learned: anytime you're going to take any of these plugs out, if you can, it's actually good to take it, and much like I did hitting it sideways, but if you just take and hit an Allen directly into one of these Allen heads, it helps to free up those threads so that then when we come to break it, I'm able to get it by hand instead of having to try and tap it around and potentially round off your Allen head itself or bend your Allen. If you just take it, tap into it, it'll loosen these threads enough that you can then free it up. Alright, let's get this stuff out of the way and we will drain this rear differential. Pretty dark. 80,000 miles of wear. Okay, look in here. Don't know if this has a magnetic plug or not. But let's wipe it and just see if we see any metal shavings. As that drains. No, it actually looks pretty good. Other than the oil being a bit dark. But, I mean, it's over 80,000 miles in this differential. Now, while we allow these things to drain out, go ahead and get your plug nice and clean and ready to go back in. So, I usually let this drain until you basically stop getting drips. So, we'll let this kind of sit here. I'm going to keep the plug here and we'll move back around to and now I'm going to clean this. Move back around to removing this axle so that we can try and figure out how to do the seal. The seal is going to be interesting. I did go and buy a cheap seal puller from Harbor Freight, but that seal puller I think is quite a bit smaller than the actual seal that I've got to remove. So it might be interesting how we get it out of here. Let's hope it will be as easy as pulling that axle was. Got the axle free. I need to try and carefully remove it. The housing, trying to not cut myself or mess up the axle in the process. Okay. Where can I route this through? I think I'm going to have to hold up on this control arm as I feed the axle through. Trying not to tear up the CV boot or the axle or anything else. Okay. There's my axle. Clearly needs to be significantly cleaned from all that oil that has been leaking for clearly quite some time. But we probably should take and protect all of this. I'm probably going to go get some Ziploc bags just to keep both ends of this free from debris as we work on everything else. So. Yep. Okay, now for the fun part is trying to actually remove this seal. And I have no idea how to get it out of here. So I'm assuming it's more than just grab and pull. Yeah, it's definitely more than that. So I'm going to have to try and get that seal remover tool and see if it can pop it out. Now what's kind of concerning for me here, and we'll find out, is the seal remover is going to be quite a bit smaller than this is, so it can't pry against the seal as it's pulling it. So it's going to be prying against this metal inside. Now it's not supposed to be non-marring, So hopefully it doesn't mess up anything in the races inside of the differential as it pulls. Alright, let's see. Oop. I'm gonna have to get under there. Again, not having a car lift makes this job so much more fun. But let's see. I honestly don't feel anything that feels like it's bad with the seal, but we're gonna replace it anyway because we know it was leaking. Goes. Oh yeah, the seal is actually bad. You can see on here, internally the seal had basically entirely failed, so it's allowing oil to leak past. So far, not the worst job that I've dealt with. Looks like I do need to clean up inside of there. You can kind of see all kinds of junk, I'm assuming from the seal disintegrating. So I'll wipe all of that clean and then we'll figure out how we drive the new seal in. I did buy a seal driver as well from Harbor Freight, but I don't think it even goes large enough for this seal because this one is pretty daggum big. Alright, let's go get the new seal. So yeah, we can also see where I pulled the seal out, that there's little chunks of the old seal that are, wow, they're like stuck in there, like it melted and disintegrated. That's unfortunate, but so we're gonna go about trying to clean this all up. And if you see grass flying, that's just because we mowed grass yesterday, and when I started this little endeavor, there was 0 wind. And now, since I'm got an open differential, the wind decided to pick up, which is great. So we're gonna try and keep this as clean as we can, and then drive our new seal in. Working on this, I've actually left the plug out of the differential so that every little bit of that old oil that will drip out. Alright, I feel pretty good about how clean this is. I think I've gotten rid of all the old seal junk that was in here. And I believe we are ready for the new seal. Now, I've got a brand new dead blow hammer, also from Harbor Freight, that I'm going to use to try and drive this seal back into place before we reinsert the axle. So if you can go get that deer. Alright, so we got the new seal. We can see it is quite a bit different, completely different shape. So the inside of the existing seal looked like it was pretty good, but the outside is where it got particularly torn up, and that must be why it was leaking on us. Alright, so time to try and install this new seal, and we're going to see how that goes. I do want this to be kind of as clean as possible. This seal is quite a bit different than any of the videos that I've seen. That one was covered in oil, and I'm kind of wondering whether I should coat it in oil prior to inserting or trying to tap the seal into place, or if I should do it dry. I think I'm going to tap it in dry, because it looks like it shouldn't really move, because all the moving parts should be inside of here. That one clearly did move for some reason, but so I'm going to tap it in dry, and then I'll probably actually oil the inside of the seal before I insert the axle back in. This is assuming I can get the seal in there. This is gonna be fun. And the dad grunts and everything else along the way are just sound effects to make this video much more interesting. Now I'm gonna do this in a very, very tight space. Oh, wow. That actually was... Alright, so now I got it cleaned. I think I got it in all the way. So, fingers crossed that this is all done as it's supposed to be. I did wrap the ends of the axle in these Ziploc bags to try and keep any debris or trash from getting on them through, not only while they were sitting out here in the wind and the grass blowing around, but also just as I'm trying to feed it back through this contaminated space into there, that I'd try and not get any dirt on the axle gears. And this, let's start the fun process of trying to insert the axle back into the void where it came from, and trying to not mess up my CV boots in the process. So now I'm going to get down there and take the bags off, and then what I should have to do is start to slide the axle in, rotating it until it seats into the gears of the differential itself. So we'll see how this goes. Now that I'm into this, in the process of trying to keep everything clean, I just got it dirty. So, hand me a paper towel. So this here is definitely lubricated. So, with that, I'm going to reach in where my differential is, grab some of this oil, and just rub it around part of the seal. Try and pre-lubricate it. And we are ready to try and insert in this tight freaking space. Okay. Tell me if I'm going in straight. Definitely not all the way in. I'm wondering if I'm going to have to drive this thing in, or if it should just slide in. It's a walking ring, and so I'm probably going to have to drive it past that point. But I did feel it slot into some gears. as I army roll from out from under the car, covered in grease. Okay. Now, I did feel, and I can feel that I'm locked into gears because I can't turn it anymore. So when I went to, that's might have been all it took. I may not have to actually drive it in. Huh. Because that looks like it's back at the right spot here. Let me get down there and just look and see if that gap is now gone between where the axle and the differential join. Yep, we look like we're properly seated now. That took way less force than I was honestly expecting to get that back together. Now, to start reassembly. Slide that back in there. These actually, since I didn't spin the rotor or anything, actually went back in pretty easily. Okay. I guess it's kind of just go in reverse order of how I took it apart to get it all back together. Now, for that, I guess every single one of these had that flat spot on it, even the one that wasn't in tight clearance. And this one, if I recall correctly, came from the outside in to hold this assembly. So this is where it's going to get a little bit fun. That tried to slide out on me. Is I'm going to push all these pieces together at the same time. Together, okay. Gotta get this bolt back on. This nut back on the bolt, rather. Side on it. Okay, there we go. If you can get your eyes on it, sometimes it's way easier than just feeling it out. So we'll just do that as kind of a point to start. Again, not tightening any of this stuff back down until I'm finished. I'm guessing this one being lower will be easier to shove into place, get the bolt in prior to reapplying the top. And if I recall correctly, this bolt came through like this. So now we gotta, again, try and hold everything in alignment using the various parts of your body, because I am not a professional mechanic with all the tools. But so far it seems to be coming along, and I'm guessing these notch out points are intended to be aligned with where we have flat spots. So there's a flat spot here and a flat spot here, so that these two things don't interact with one another, is my guess. But it might be pointless, but I assume since they are notched out, they have a purpose. But you know what, assumptions. Let's get this guy started. And again, pushing down, pushing together until, oh yep, this one definitely has to use that notch to slip past. Okay. And something that is probably worth noting here is as I'm threading these nuts back on and they get most of the way through the threads, I'm actually feeling tension. And so what that probably means, because it won't let me thread it all the way down to where I would just get a wrench on it and tighten, that probably means that these things are taper lock nuts. So instead of it having that nylon washer in it, the nut itself actually tapers down to a tighter space, and so it holds itself in place with that tension of the nut on the bolt itself. So if you happen to break any of these, make sure that you get the right nuts when you replace it. Don't just put a regular nut on there because it could vibrate off. And with that, we're going to tighten these things back up. Actually, now I can reinsert these little green trees that hold this control wire in place. I'm glad that they didn't snap on me as I was pulling them out. And it's all three of these. They're back in place now. I can tighten down all the rest of this. For this, going back to my battery powered impact, but again setting it down to the lowest power just to not overdo it. Now what's kind of a challenge with this particular one is this comes across at an angle, and so to get in here I'm kind of like this. So let me see if I put an extension on it. That extension's long enough as well. That was not impact rated. My impact rated extension, I can get to where, yeah, I don't have that bad angle. Alright, there's one on. Last but not least,
the flat spot was where it goes?
it did not, but I think we're good now. I think it's mainly so that you get clearance as you're coming through here, because these things will move a little bit, but I think we'll be okay. Just make sure. So I don't know what the torque rating's supposed to be on these, so I'm just taking it down to where it's actually not moving with the hit of the impact. And next step, I can reattach this here. I can get that too, but I'm going to start with this one. I'm actually going to go ahead and put some more penetrating lubricant on it before I drive it on. Just to help a little bit with it threading back on here. I'm guessing, given the tension that I had coming off, this is also potentially a taper lock nut. Oh, nope, it is not. So this one you just gotta get really tight. Okay, so putting this nut back on, just going back to the impact. On this one, it's quite a bit larger of a nut, so I'm going to tighten it quite a bit. And definitely don't want that one to be free. part's done. And now, I gotta put the brake caliper back on. And this was the one that had the tightest clearance thing to deal with. So this might be a little fun.
What?
Yes, Bubba, I need to wash my hands. This is a dirty job, Bubba. So when you put this back on, remember how it came off. So in this particular case, the hose was pointed up, which then I guess kind of pulled all this stuff in like this. But you gotta make sure you don't twist the hose in the process. So let's just, since I didn't adjust anything about the brake caliper itself, and the brake hasn't been engaged, I don't have to do anything. But if you had decided to change your pads in the process, then you might have to compress this just to get it on here. But in this case, I think they're just gonna slide right back in. Yep, since they haven't been adjusted in any way. And we will.
What day am I?
This bottom one in first, because it's certainly going to be the easier of the two. If I can find it. Way back. So, I don't know if people watching this video are going to know this or not, but to get a tire back in, you can kind of rock it back and forth. And then a little trick, unless you just want to be a big burly man and lift the tire, that you can do to make it really easy to get the tire on and aligned is you actually use your legs and just kind of like squeeze them up, and that helps you hold it in place. Push in. Then you're not holding all the way to that tire and trying to align it at the same time. Alright, so with this, with your lug nuts, you always want to hand thread to get them started before you apply the impact. Alright, so that we're on to the last part of this, which is just getting the oil back into the car. With this particular car requires 75-85 year oil. I spoke to my local dealership here in town, and they basically said you can put any kind of 75-85 oil. I figured since I was already getting the seal from them and they were relatively competitive on their oil, that I'd go ahead and go with OEM for the oil. One thing that I did not see in the other videos I've seen about the car online with changing the oil in the differential is the dealership did say that I need to add this limited slip additive, because I guess it's a limited slip differential that needs to be put in with this oil for the differential. And you put one of these bottles per differential. Since we're only changing the oil in one differential, we only need one bottle. This bottle's pretty small. The space up there is really tight. I'm hoping that with this one I can use this little comb to actually squirt the bottle in, but I definitely can't do that with these bottles. These bottles are way too large to fit and turn upside down to actually pour all the oil into the differential. So while I was at Harbor Freight, I got this pump, this gear oil pump. Actually, it's 4 gear oil specifically, and each squirt of it is supposed to be 1 ounce, so I should be able to get the exact number of ounces, which they said it's 1.4 quarts of oil is what this takes. I guess it'll be 1.4 quarts minus the 4 ounces that we have here, so I'll have to do about 40 pumps of this oil into the differential, and then we will pretty much be done with this job and hopefully done with this leak. With that, let's get back under the car and get back to it. Alright, so this fill where we opened it up for the drain is where we gotta fit this little bottle. It looks like I'm probably gonna have enough space. Just carefully go. However, so, fun learning. The part about this that you couldn't see on the box is just how big the pump is. Well, these little quart gear oil things have a small head, so the pump won't actually fit in this bottle. So, I'm gonna have to have a little fun with it and make our opening on the bottle large enough to fit the pump. Try and do this very carefully so that you don't drop any pieces of plastic down in the oil itself, but just make room for our pump to be able to go in to the bottle. And always cut away from yourself, so that you don't end up coming back and slicing your finger. I know from experience. Alright, that's gonna work. Cool. Now let's get under the car and start putting in some fluid. That's bottle number 1. Now since this takes, I think it's 45 total ounces that we need. So we need to refill our bottle with 5 more ounces of oil and then continue. This.
And go.
Got a refill, ready to go. So with this, since you can't really gauge the level in here, I'm guessing there's a little bit of oil still left in the pan. And so I'm pumping up to what it was supposed to be, but clearly it's a little bit more, or a little bit less than what the amount that it says this differential is going to take. So basically what we do is we pump it up to where it's at least filled to that line, and then we can let it drain back down to flush with the fill. So we'll just let this finish draining back out. We'll put the plug in and we'll be done. Well, looks like it's about stopped with the drip, or with the drain. Now it's just down to a very minor drip, so that's probably plenty for us to go ahead and plug it up. Something I didn't show you, but I always do, is put a little bit of oil on the O-ring of these things prior to putting them back in, just so that they stay properly lubricated and sealed better. Okay, that's good. Now we go about just wiping up any loose oil that we see anywhere in here, just so that it doesn't drip wherever we go next. And on our concrete here. Oop. And then we'll be ready to take it for a spin and see if we've solved our leak. Now just to test it out, make sure everything works. So I'm going to go take it for a spin, heat up the oil a little bit, bring it back, set it over some cardboard and see if it leaks. Thank you for joining us on our first YouTube video, starting our channel with fixing my wife's car.